folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick. It's time for this week's Know Your Foe episode. So we're looking at the Los Angeles Rams coming to Baltimore after the bye week. Really great bye week. I think we'll all agree for the Ravens in terms of all of the things that went well. But here to talk Rams is Jake Ellenbogen. Jake, how you doing?
I'm good. Ken, it's nice to be back. I appreciate you inviting me back. And man, this game is massive. It really is. I think the Ravens, I'll just say it, right off the rip. I have them winning the Super Bowl. So I have a lot of respect for the Ravens and, just that defense and, their nickel looks. I think they're just an absolutely scary team at this point in the season.
All right, well, great. We'll see how this works out, but we definitely have you on to try and learn what we can about the Rams personnel and schemes. So let's jump right into it if we can. In terms of the offseason and what happened, were there any major additions for the Rams?
Yeah. So, I mean, they go and they give up on a bunch of guys, right? They're paying $75 million to guys that aren't on the roster, but they went out and they got some bargain bin signings that have been huge. One of those that has been absolutely huge is Ahkello Witherspoon, who is the number one corner on this team. His season right now through the first 13 weeks of the season, I went back and, compiled all the data. It rivals Jalen Ramsey's best season in 2021. I mean, that's the level he's playing at, and you can see it on film. Crazy length and everything. And really the Rams have been, predominantly like a cover 3 defense, playing that soft zone, definitely safety help over the top. But since this team doesn't have a Leonard Floyd up front anymore, they don't have a Von Miller, guys that can really rush the passer off the edge. They've had some production, but not a ton. Raheem Morris, the defensive coordinator, has tried different, avenues to, create pressure. And one of those things have been sending safety blitzes, sending linebackers, sending extra guys. And, they've been able to do that because now they have so much confidence in Ahkello Witherspoon to be on an island that they won't have that safety help over the top because they trust him in that one-on-one opportunity. So he's been huge. They made a trade right before the season. They acquired, it's actually another former Pittsburgh Steeler. They acquired Kevin Dotson. The reason the Steelers moved on from him, which what I was told, is that he no longer fit their blocking scheme. Well, I can tell you that there are a lot of Steelers fans that would kill to have him right now. He's tied for the number one offensive line grade, according to Pro Football Focus right now. He's been a blessing for the Rams. Didn't play the first 3 games because he was acclimating to the offense. They integrated him in week 4 against the Colts, and immediately Kyron Williams took off in the run game. Immediately the running game took off. Sean McVay trusted the running game. And he's been a blessing at right guard. Just, stout. He's even gotten better. He's always been great in the run game. Was a big fan of him coming out of Louisiana Lafayette. But he's even better now in pass pro, which is something you like to see. They also got Demarcus Robinson, who played for the Ravens last year, caught a touchdown in the playoffs. And, this is somebody who just caught his first touchdown of the year last week. He's somebody that's had a great camp. He's had great practices, but Puka Nakua's emergence kind of buried him. They had Tutu Atwell. They did have the cup injury, but they had Van Jefferson at the time. So now, really what has been decided is that Demarcus Robinson has been rock solid in practice. He's been one of the best receivers in the building, and they're starting to give him looks, and the guy just finds a way to get open. He's been very reliable. He caught a huge touchdown last week, like I mentioned, and really those have been the guys. I mean, they got Duke Shelley, who's played well at times, but he's currently on IR. But this is not a team that went out and got a lot of guys in the offseason.
So whose spot is Demarcus Robinson taking? Because I see he just started getting snaps in the last 2 games. Who's out that he's getting time?
They're kind of rotating. For the most part, it seemed like Tutu Atwell in the second half. And I think a lot of that was more based on the matchup against the Browns. They were taking a lot of the deep throws away. And I think they liked Demarcus Robinson's bigger body in the intermediate game and how he matched up. And I think that was more of on the fly game, adjustment. Because, I mean, Atwell, he's been really good this year. They just haven't been able to really get him the ball, but all over tape, you can see this guy always open. He's generated four defensive pass interference calls for over 100 yards this year. He's one of the top leaders in that category. And he had a huge one against the Browns. So he finds his way, to get open downfield. Stafford tends to underthrow him a little bit or overthrow him. But I thought, he's played really well. And Puka Nacua, he's been awesome. But I think that's a big thing that kind of adds some intrigue to the offense is anytime you're able at this point in the season, Ken, I mean, I don't have to tell you, you've watched a lot of football, but anytime at this point in the season, this late in the season, where you're able to integrate a new player, like I've been watching film on last 7 games, and this guy's not on film. And now all of a sudden he shows up, and now that's another guy you have to be cognizant of. And I think that's just the brilliance of bringing him on, as well as Hunter Long, who was part of the Jalen Ramsey trade. He's been huge in the blocking game, and he had a couple options where he could have caught touchdowns near the red zone where he was the first read. They took it away and they threw it to Demarcus Robinson or a Cooper Kupp. But yeah, they've been mixing and matching a little bit, and I'm glad they have.
So Puka, since we're talking about receivers anyway, obviously had a massive rookie year, and for a 5th round pick to jump in and play at his level, kind of exactly what the doctor ordered for a team like the Rams. It's kind of buried themselves in bad draft picks or lack of number 1 draft picks and some cap help. Yeah,
it's surprising, Ken. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say, I knew Puka Nacua was going to do this. I was more on the fence. Like, I've seen Sean McVay have talented receivers in the building, like a Van Jefferson, like a Josh Reynolds, and he kind of gives them like a red shirt season, uses them a little bit early on the season to kind of give him some confidence, but then is like, you know what? He needs some time. Puka Nacua didn't have that because he had a great preseason right off the bat, had great chemistry with Stetson Bennett in those preseason games. But then in camp, when Cooper Kupp gets hurt in August, now he's taking on those first team reps. And so I think that was a big thing there because essentially now, he's taking those first team reps on. Cooper Kupp's out. Puka Nacua is now getting opportunities with Stafford that he wouldn't otherwise had. And I think that got him prepared because, it's not to say that, a 5th rounder could totally replicate what he's doing. But I mean, this kind of speaks to a further truth here that maybe, a lot of this is just the lack of familiarity with the starting quarterback. A lot of these 5th round picks don't get a chance in practice and in this opportunity to, grow and have a Matthew Stafford throwing to him or Lamar Jackson's, most likely going to get, Brett Rippon or John Wolford or, and that's the thing. I mean, that's just the reality in the NFL is you have to like work your way up and pay your dues if you're a later pick. Sometimes we have these, but I think Nacua has made the most of his opportunities. The thing that I don't understand, Ken, is I've watched Nacua all year and he hit another level on the speed scale last week. I've never seen him run like that going back to BYU. I always kind of looked at him as like a Deebo Samuel, that he has kind of that, that build-up speed, can be kind of that gadget guy coming out of BYU, but he's a better natural hands catcher.
Was this on the run play or a pass play? Because he got a couple of runs this last week, as I recall, against
every play. Last week, he just looks so much faster, and I don't have any football explanation as to why. Even Next Gen Stats had him as I think it was the 3rd fastest time of the week. You had DK Metcalf's crazy touchdown on Thursday Night Football. Then the second one is Tyreek Hill, and the third one's Nacua.
What was the speed on it? Do you remember? Like 20 point something?
It was definitely over 21 miles per hour. DK was the only one over 22, but it was like 30 tenths of a second behind Tyreek Hill. And
usually that's a measure of top speed after significant acceleration on a long touchdown. So it happened on the 70. The 70-yard touchdown. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just, I haven't seen that. I mean, he's had some big plays. He's gotten the build-up speed, but he felt kind of like Cooper Kupp, his rookie year, where it's like, okay, this guy's 4'6", 40, I didn't see that yesterday. I saw a guy that was blazing fast. I saw the guy that looked like Cooper Kupp when he came back from the ACL tear in 2019. I mean, it was crazy.
Talk about Matthew Stafford a little bit in terms of where he is this year.
Yeah, stats lie. I don't have to tell you that. I think the film speaks for itself. I think Stafford's played really well this year. He's had some moments where, Matthew Stafford moments that he had back with Detroit, back when he had during the Super Bowl season. But all in all, I think Stafford's played really well. He is near the top in the big time throws, and not really high in the turnover worthy plays. He's near the bottom of the league in turnover worthy plays. And I just feel like, of course, he has that, that stigma, like, oh, this guy just throws pick sixes, but he's actually played really well. He's had to make some big time throws. Keep in mind, he played the first 4 games with a rookie wide receiver, Puka Nacua, who just blew up. And he played with Tutu Atwell, who might as well have been a rookie. Very, very limited starting opportunities there. So what he's done, I think, has been magnificent, considering the fact there's been lately they've had their bill of health on the offensive line. But to start the season, it was this guy in, this guy out. Alec Jackson's out. Joe Nopum's in. Joe Nopum's out at right guard. Now it's Tremaine Ankrum. They started, Zach Thomas comes in at right tackle or left tackle in the Bengals game. They've been without Rob Havenstein in a couple other games. Like, it has not been perfect on the offense. It's obviously a lot better than last year, where they started like 17 different combinations. But I think that Stafford, all things considered, the biggest question when you suffer, the injuries he had, first concussion of his career, you don't know how he's going to respond there. Mm-hmm. But then also, I mean, the spinal
That's actually
cord.
Amazing.
Yeah,
for a player like Stafford.
I couldn't believe that. But the spinal cord injury, Ken, I was really concerned. I never was like, he's going to retire, but I was really concerned about the spinal cord because, it's a contusion and you could say, okay, well, whatever, but it was significant and it was enough to keep him out the rest of the year. They were still alive in the playoff race when they sat him. So, you don't know how he's going to respond. And then they come out against Seattle. And I mean, it just looks like, vintage Matthew Stafford. And I think he's really built on that. Now, it doesn't mean he hasn't had a bad game or two, but for the most part this year, I mean, the last 3 games, he has 8 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. I mean, I think the big reason the last 3 games mean so much, the reason why he's scoring touchdowns more, I think also what's kind of used against him are the lack of touchdowns. They've been running the ball more in the red zone, Kyron Williams, than they normally do. So that's a lot of opportunities that are going to the running back, first off. The second thing is, last 3 games, I have to be honest here. I think that they've changed up the offense a little bit. And that makes sense. I mean, you had the bye, you come back out of the bye. I want to see you change things up, especially at 3 and 6. But one thing I like that they've done is they've gone with more of the short passing game. And a thing that you notice on film right away is that Stafford in the Rams really early in the season, it was working, but over time, like when you're playing a Ravens pass rush, or you're playing a 49ers or an Eagles, it doesn't work as well. A lot of long developing plays, got guys 20 yards down the field, no check down, nobody in the flat, and that's a problem.
Well, Ravens are certainly defensively, their entire scheme is in taking away the deep ball, and they've allowed the fewest by far explosive plays this year, and explosive plays in the pass game specifically. But the thing that I wanted to hear from you is whether or not the Rams are particularly adaptable towards working underneath, because the Ravens also have great horizontal defenders underneath. In particular, I mean, Roquan's outstanding, but the best horizontal defender in the entire NFL right now, for my money, is Kyle Hamilton. And he takes away a half of the field. If you run a lot of wide receiver screens, that becomes very difficult. You want to try and free up your tight end by flexing him and trying to get him off the line of scrimmage easier. That becomes something that he can really work on. And he rushes the passer effectively as well, gets in on the run game. Blocks don't seem to affect him when they come from wide receivers or smaller players. He's too long for them. So I kind of wonder, how would Stafford attack this team with the pass if they're going to stay primarily a passing team?
That's the thing. I don't think they're going to stay primarily a passing team. I think the Browns gave them looks they weren't expecting. But I think they went into that game full well that they were going to run the ball. And they have since adapted. And I think a lot of it has to do with an offensive coordinator that no one talks about in Mike LaFleur. He might not be calling plays, but I definitely see, and I covered the Jets last year, I definitely see a handprint at the very least of Michael LaFleur in the last 3 weeks of this offense. And the last 2 games, Kyren Williams came back. This is a 5-3 team with Kyren Williams and a 1-3 team without him. I think he's really the engine to this offense, and he doesn't have the long speed that Todd Gurley had or the explosiveness, but he is essentially their Todd Gurley back in 2017 when the offense really ran through him. And we've seen that. He has 10 touchdowns already. I mean, he's the guy that they're really relying on. And so I think in this one, it's funny because I feel like last week was great since they were able to go up against the Browns, which I feel are a very similar team to the Ravens. They want to take away, the deep stuff. They want you to throw underneath. They got some athletic guys in, Taki, and guys like that in the linebacker room that can play sideline to sideline, that can stop you, and I feel like it was kind of similar to what the Ravens were going to do. So the good news is that the Rams, I think, kind of prepared for this by playing the Browns. The bad news is the Rams just put that out on tape for the first time, probably all year, for the Ravens to study. So, it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. But I think this is one where we finally saw, okay, how is Kyren Williams? Biggest question with him. He's been outstanding, but how is he going to be as soon as teams start stacking the box? Because Stafford has a lot of respect from a lot of teams. And this was the first game, believe it or not, all year, Ken, that defenses have stacked the box with Kyren Williams at running back. And we saw Kyren Williams in over 20 carries got to 81 yards, and that was good enough to keep the game going, allow them to have their game plan still in the mix. It's not the 100-yard performance I'm sure Kyren would have wanted, but it was good enough to keep and extend drives. And the thing about him is that he's 5'9", $196. He's great in pass protection, and this is somebody that is just stronger than you would ever think. You watch him run and you're like, how is this guy leading the league in yards after contact? It's crazy to me per run. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. And I think that's been a huge thing for the Rams.
So I'm noticing the 30 missed tackles forced. And for those who don't know Kyren Williams, who haven't really seen him play, he's a smallish back at 5'9" and under 200 pounds. So under 200 pounds is kind of unusual for running back these days. Actually, a little bit like a slightly larger version of Keaton Mitchell. Keaton Mitchell has been an unbelievable tackle breaker in the same way. So I'm looking at it, 30 of 134 for Kyren Williams is excellent. If it's about in a low, just over, okay, let's do it out so we have the thing, 0.22 per run. And by comparison, I'll get the one for Keaton Mitchell as we go here, but it's a similar runner, definitely a guy who breaks tackles. And that is an area where the Ravens have problems, particularly at linebacker, is with some broken tackles on the weak side.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned Keaton Mitchell. This is somebody that I swore would make plays on Sundays the moment he stepped in the league. I don't know how he went undrafted. I had a second round grade on him. And the reason is because, everyone talks about the light and, small stature and light, but the guy didn't fumble. So it's like, you're telling me he's going to get popped in the NFL and he's going to fumble. He didn't fumble. He had great ball security. He was a lightning rod. I mean, the fact that you could have a guy like that, he's essentially a laser beam on the field.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a matter of pass blocking. So when people come to the NFL, they want a guy who has this kind of speed. Certainly, they don't want just a gadget guy. They want a guy who can actually go after the back, come out of the backfield and catch passes. And he's ended up being that, by the way. He's been a good receiver as well. But the problem was that they didn't really think he could hold up to being on the field on third down. And if you need to get a contribution as a pass blocker, the Ravens are a team who desperately need that. Yeah. And they still found a way to have him lead now in snaps. The last week was the last game. It wasn't last week. It was the first time he led the running backs in snaps.
Yeah, he's crazy. I mean, if he figures it out in pass pro and he starts getting comfortable, I mean, the sky's the limit with him. I mean, we've seen it. We've seen guys. Austin Eckler was kind of this unknown guy that the Chargers got. A lot of people weren't talking about, and then he ended up becoming a star. I remember Phillip Lindsay. Everyone forgot about him. Now he fell off, but Phillip Lindsay's rookie year, he was a 1,000-yard rusher. And he's a guy that you find late or you find UDFA and there are a lot of, the problem is this is a position where, especially this draft, Ken, I could have gone You could have had a show for 2 hours about this. The running backs in this draft were so deep. Probably the deepest I've seen in years. And I think it's actually, it contributed to a lot of the holding out by the higher or the wanted to be higher paid running backs. A lot of the uncertainty, because I think teams were looking at like Israel Abanikanda, for instance, right. And like, are we so sure like having him on a rookie deal isn't a better option than paying this guy $16 million? I mean, and that's really what it has come down to. And, it's funny, we talked about Puka in the 5th. Kyron Williams is from the 5th round. So, you can find value, especially at this position, all over the draft. And we're seeing it.
You know what? I think one of the phenomenons that happening, I agree with, by the way, what you're saying is that people want to basically protect themselves from having to pay a second contract to a running back. One of the ways that's manifesting himself is with a higher retention rate on UDFA backs or guys in the late rounds. And it used to be you'd slip some of those guys into the practice squad and just hope for the best. The Ravens even lost a couple guys like that, including Raheem Mostert and Mizell, a guy who played for the Bears. But you now, I think the tendency, and it was with Mitchell, I don't think there was ever a question from the very first time. It's priority UDFA. They got him. And then there was never really a question that he'd be cut because he'd have been snagged right away by some other team. Yeah. And their other options are like Melvin Gordon, who's still on their practice squad. So it's there's not a lot to choose from there. It's not a difficult choice to make, I should say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's exciting to see a guy like Keaton Mitchell, and it kind of it breathes life in the NFL, knowing like, hey, you know what? Maybe there is a reason why I'm a running back. I mean, they don't get paid well, but look, like I could make a team as a UDFA, and they're giving these guys carries, and it's a position you're getting hit just about every play. I mean, there's a chance you're going to get hurt. There's a chance next man up, you're going to get an opportunity. I mean, we've seen that, and he's made the most of it. And I'm happy for him because Keaton is one of those guys, like watch him in East Carolina. I was like, this guy's special. I don't know what his role in the NFL will be. I just kind of called him a football player because I was like, I don't know. Are they going to use him as a receiver? Like, I don't know how, the NFL is going to view him, but I just know the guy he's got elite breakaway speed. And I think he's actually, the main concern of my first concern for any Rams fans, Lamar Jackson. No one forgot about the 2019 season. I know Sean McVay didn't forget 5 touchdowns from Lamar Jackson at the Coliseum. I was recording a podcast in the third quarter laughing because it was a laugher. Like the Ravens absolutely decimated the Rams. But then the last time the Rams played, the Ravens in Baltimore, it was against Tyler Huntley. And, you haven't played Lamar since 2019. And who's to say that's not a huge advantage for Lamar Jackson? They haven't seen him since 2019. You can watch the tape, but it's different with a guy like that out there. One thing I'll say, Ken, that I feel really good about with the Rams is that earlier in the year, when Stetson Bennett went on the non-football injury and illness list, they only had Brett Rippon on the team. I had so many issues with it. I thought they should have signed a Wentz, a Flacco, somebody, but they did not. So the reason why I feel like this was such a big deal is because he was running the scout team. And I noticed earlier in the season, this defense, very uncharacteristic under the Sean McVay era, this defense was struggling against mobile quarterbacks. Before this year, Lamar Jackson was really the only time I've ever seen a mobile quarterback crush the Rams. And I'm watching Anthony Richardson's having his way, Jalen Hurts, great athleticism and everything. I'm not taking that away, but I've seen them stifle Kyler Murray, Russell Wilson. What's happening? And I was thinking about it recently. They got Carson Wentz at the bye. I think Carson Wentz is a big reason because now he's running the scout team. He's got the mobility to simulate at least a mobile quarterback. Rippon did not. And I'm starting to see the defense seems more prepared. And you saw it against Kyler. They stifled Kyler. You saw it against Geno. They continued to stifle Geno. And obviously, Joe Flacco's not really that mobile.
I was just going to say.
But my thing is, I think going into this game, I'm not saying that, Carson Wentz simulates Lamar Jackson, because honestly, no one simulates Lamar Jackson. His stop and start ability is insane. But I think it gives them a better shot than it would if they were playing earlier in the year. Not to mention just the other factors, having Kyron Williams, all of that. But I do feel a little bit better about that, knowing that I feel like they're more prepared against a mobile quarterback than they were earlier in the season.
All right, take us through the offensive line now. Who's going to be active and likely playing in this game for the Rams from left to right?
Yeah, so from left to right, you're likely going to see Alec Jackson. I'm barring anything that happens throughout the week. Alec Jackson seems good to go at left tackle. He went up against Myles Garrett last week. He did pretty well, but it was a very quick passing game plan, running the football, trying to slow down the pass rush, and a lot of chips. You had whether it was Hunter Long or Tyler Higbee or Kyron Williams going out there and hitting Myles Garrett. He wasn't on, wasn't alone on an island there. So he's at left tackle. Left guard.
I'll just ask a question maybe about each of these linemen as we go potentially. Yeah. But Alaric's been penalized a lot less than most tackles, which is very valuable. In fact, PFF underweights the cost of penalties, which means a player like Alec Jackson, they're probably underrating him somewhat. Has he been the pass blocker you'd hoped he'd be at this point otherwise, other than the penalties?
Alaric's a friend of mine. I've talked to him quite a few times. I will say this. I think he's a solid player that the Rams can eventually move and go out and get their replacement for Andrew Whitworth. I don't think he's the Whitworth replacement. I think he's a solid player. This stuff starts to kind of rear its ugly head when you go up against a team like the Ravens or the 49ers or whatnot. Having just a solid left tackle, like that can be a problem. But we saw last week what a quick game plan, if you can make plays, of course, what it can do for you and how it made Alec Jackson have a better game. The penalty, the discipline there, I don't want to undersell. I think that, to your point, that's a huge thing. But this is not somebody getting out in space like an Andrew Whitworth in the screen game as a convoy, getting up there 20, 30 yards down the field. He doesn't do anything extra. He's just a very solid UDFA that turned into a starter. They paid him more than any UDFA they've paid out of Iowa. And he's got some tools. And, whether a move to guard makes sense or not, moving forward down the road, I don't know. I definitely want him on the roster. But I do think that that's one of their weaker positions. And I think it's one of those things where if you go up against like kind of a middle tier pass rush, you're not going to really notice it. When you go up against the big boys like the Ravens, the 49ers, teams that are leading the league in pressures, things like that, you'll start to notice it. All right. So then, we move on to left guard here. That's going to be Steve Avila, the rookie out of TCU. I think Steve is an interesting one here because, it's surprising to see, the Rams take a guard, with their first pick in the draft in the second round. Avila has a lot of fans inside the organization. They were ecstatic to have him. This is somebody that I think he only gave up one sack in like 1,000 snaps at TCU, a natural center that moved to guard for the benefit of the team. I would still like to see him at center down the road, but I like him at left guard. Really good in the run game. I think he's quality in the passing game, in pass pro. He's somebody that's just going to continue to get better and better each week. But again, going up against a better defense, you start to see, okay, the rookie's really good, but he's going to have his moments that, a couple of those plays could be huge.
Okay, so is he the mobility you want at left guard, good puller, footwork good in terms of the guys in the middle, pulls out well?
Yes, and he's very strong too, very strong. So he's got a little bit of a mean streak too, which I like. Then center, you have Coleman Shelton, who is really an average to below average center, can have some moments, but really he's, I think, the weakest link of the offense, on the offensive line. He wasn't the starter in the Super Bowl season. That was Brian Allen. Brian Allen has since lost the job to Coleman Shelton. Shelton is really more of a run guy. Pass pro, he's okay. This is definitely going to, he's going to need some help. I mean, he's not a guy that you feel, really, really confident in to just kind of anchor in the middle there.
Can you kind of describe what is going wrong on pass blocking? Because obviously he's got a very low grade from PFF, but is he a guy who has a lot of trouble picking out blitzes, a lot of trouble with stunts? Is he okay even anchoring against a single big nose tackle when they manufacture that one-on-one matchup for him?
Yeah, so the problem with him is that he's just not a good matchup. When you have a big nose tackle, he's around 300 pounds. I think he's actually like not even 300 pounds. It's close. He's on the lighter side, and so he's a little bit more of like a technician. Doesn't really have that mauler ability, and I think that does hurt him. But also when you have that technician build instead of more of like a big mauler, big stronger offensive lineman. You have to be able to move and be nimble footed. And I still feel like he's just a tick off. Like the problem is if you're a tick off in the NFL, that's going to be a problem. So, that's been his issue. Right guard, I talked to you about. Kevin Dotson has been the man. He has been unbelievable for the Rams. He is everything they could have asked for. I'm so impressed. Every week, he just brings it. He really does. He's got this tenacity in the run game, but he's gotten better each week in pass protection, which is something, apparently Steeler fans really had an issue with. I just think he's gotten better all around, and I think a lot of it is Ryan Wendell, the offensive line coach, but something that doesn't get reported enough and you might not know about, Mike Munchak is in the room, and he's great. He's one of the best offensive line coaches that we've seen in a few years. He's a consultant. I don't know if he's actively, getting paid by the Rams or whatever. I don't know like what's going on there, but he's been around the team, and Sean McVay never fails to mention him in his post-game pressers and things when he's talking about the offensive line and how important it is to have him in the room. So he's been huge.
Okay, so one of the things I look at is go across and the penalties for the Rams on the offensive line, across the offensive line, just absolutely ridiculously low. So 2 at left tackle, 2 at left guard, 1 at right guard, and 574 snaps, it looks like, and 5 at center with a guy who's having some trouble getting beat. Still an outstanding total. Take us to the right tackle here.
Yeah, so that's Rob Havenstein, and Rob Havenstein is just a model of consistency. One of the top 10 best right tackles in football. The poor guy didn't miss a game last year, and he had to play with just every single offensive lineman the Rams could find. I mean, whoever was on speed dial, they brought back a guy in Ty Nsekhe who was on their practice squad in 2012. I mean, that's basically where they were at that point. So Havenstein's has been a model of consistency, and we saw how important it is to have him in the lineup. He was not there in the Dallas game. That was a disaster. He was not there in the Packers game. That was a disaster. Albeit most of it was on the quarterback. But, Havenstein, there's a reason why he got a second contract. I mean, they really, or third contract at this point. They really like him. He's been kind of a leader, on that offensive line. So to have him and Dotson, your 2 best guys, it's why they're the best team in the league when running right end, in the run game. And I think it definitely speaks volumes to just how important that right side of the offensive line is.
So they have a right-handed run game. The tight end usually is on the right side, and they run a power game or a lot of counters or whatever it might be that they have to open the front gate with Dotson.
So they've been mixing up a little bit more recently. They ran a bunch of sweeps, which we never really see. Toss sweeps to the left, toss sweeps to the right. I mean, it was a really diversified, running attack against the Baltimore, the Cleveland Browns. And I wonder if we see that this week. They switched to a gap scheme. They've always been predominantly zone. They switched to gap scheme this year, and it was right. I think they decided to do this right at the end of last year when Cam Akers started to have a random resurgence in the last 4 games of the season. But ironically, since Cam Akers has asked for a trade, he is gone, and Kyron has kind of taken over.
Aaron Rodgers' season is officially over, but yours has just begun at MyBookie. NFL, college ball, and a brand new cash-out system gives you options to bet and win all season long. First 2 legs of your parlay hit, cash out early and place another bet, or let it ride for a chance at an even bigger payday. Join us at MyBookie for an entire season filled with daily odd boost, same-game parlays, and huge prize pool contests. Right now, MyBookie has a no-strings-attached cash bonus that lets you deposit and withdraw quick. Use the promo code RAVENS on your first deposit of $50 or more, and you can receive up to $200 in cash instantly credited to your MyBookie account. That's promo code RAVENS to claim your cash bonus now. You can bet anything, anytime, anywhere only with MyBookie.
And they really like Kyron. He could play no matter, what scheme you're going to run. He likes those outside zone runs. He likes the sweeps. He likes, the duo, things like that. So, I mean, they've really been mixing it up over the last few weeks, and it's been really impressive because before it just felt like it was a really predictable. They'd run a sweep to the right every now and then, but for the most part, everything was up the middle or running right guard, and that was really it. So we've seen more diversity as of late.
Okay, we haven't really talked about the tight end position. Now you want to take a moment to talk about that, and then we'll go to the defense?
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about Tyler Higbee. He's had an issue this year staying healthy. He's been playing through it. That's Tyler Higbee fashion. Guy gets hurt, and he just plays through it. He's a football player. But he was writhing in pain, holding his hand at, in the middle of that game against the Browns. Did not return, I don't believe. And they said he was also being evaluated for a concussion. I don't really have anything on that right now. We haven't really gotten enough news on that. So whether he plays or not is up in the air. But Higbee just hasn't been as featured in this offense as years past. It's kind of weird because he did just get paid and they feel really good about him, but it's just been tough. He has not been able to really stay healthy while staying on the field. And Bryson Hopkins, who was the number 2 tight end coming into the season, has now had back-to-back healthy scratches. I think it kind of goes to show you that Hunter Long, the coaching staff believes, has surpassed him. So that's something.
After last year, were you a fan of the contract? Higbee has been 8 years in the league now. So after 7 years, you're paying a 30-year-old tight end. Are you a fan of that contract, given where the Rams are as an organization?
It's tough. Higbee statistically is the greatest tight end in Rams history. So I think that.
Snow?
Well, Jack Snow was a receiver, so it would be the tight ends. Really, it'd be between him, Billy Truex, and Pete Holohan, all time. So that's really. I do think that held more weight. If you want my honest opinion, Ken, I think Higbee is just so well regarded. And the thing that I got to give him props is that he survived. And what I mean by that is he was drafted in 2016 by the Jeff Fisher Rams. And he survived that tenure. A lot of those guys were brought over with McVay in 2017. They were gone by 2018. That was McVay's team. He wanted his guys. Higbee's been one of his guys. And, I think that's something that he's gotten, a lot better in the blocking game. So, yeah, I mean, I'm kind of beating around the bush here. I would say this. I like that Higbee got paid. I like that he remained a Ram. And the money is a bargain considering going into the season where he was and everything. It's a good deal. As time goes on, it's going to even look better. But right now, it looks a little worrisome because this guy can't stay healthy and he's dropped some key and critical plays. The Colts game, which that was crazy. I mean, you guys, you saw the Colts. They're a weird team. They don't go away. The Rams were up, I think it was 21-0, and they came back, roaring back. They almost won the game. They sent it to overtime. Higbee dropped a huge, pass that would have probably ended the game. Higbee dropped another huge pass against the Eagles, I believe, and a few others. And it's just been kind of a very unlike Higbee type of season. So I would say going into this year, he was worth the price. But Ken, as of right now, I mean, I don't think anybody would have expected him to play this poorly.
Okay. All right. So talking about specialized looks on offense, is there anything they show that's maybe a little bit different? They don't ever really use a fullback, right? Use it tight end in the backfield?
Yeah, they don't use a fullback. They really haven't mixed up. Like last year, they had Brandon Powell a little bit, taking like direct handoffs. That was a little interesting, but like they haven't really mixed things up in that way. I think actually one thing they did start doing, and I think it was because of Stafford's hip, because he injured it in the Colts game, is they started running more pistol. And the reason for that is because Stafford doesn't like, he likes being in the shotgun. He doesn't like being under center. The offensive line wasn't great at that point. I mean, they've gotten better since. And so I think it just gave Stafford more time, in the pocket. And then in addition to that, it still creates the illusion that, hey, I could also run the ball here. whereas in the shotgun, they do run it out of the shotgun, but you're more likely to see at least in my opinion, just watching football, I feel like when they're in the pistol, you just have that inkling, okay, they can run it here. But when they're in that shotgun where you have a running back next to you, I don't really get the feeling they're going to run it very often, unless it's like 3rd and long, 3rd and 20. Then you're like, okay, they're going to run it here for field position and punt the ball. But that's kind of, my take on that.
All right, very good. So let's move over to the defense. Talk a little bit maybe about the what they show in terms of a passing look. You mentioned they're mostly a cover 3 team, but what do they like to have on in terms of personnel on the field? Do they go to a dime package? Do they stick with a committed nickel? What do they do?
Yeah, they've gone base, they've gone committed nickel. I think for the most part, they're a nickel defense. They have that star position, of course, which is played by Jacoby Durant. And, they have Akello Witherspoon and right now Darion Kendrick on the outside playing corner. They've been playing a lot of match zone as well, probably more than I can remember. But, as I brought up earlier in the show, Akello's kind of doing his own thing. Like they're having him just kind of stay on an island, and they're using that opportunity to send. Quentin Lake's been out the last 2 weeks. Great young, safety in the 6th round out of UCLA. But, they've been using him when he's healthy. They've been using Jordan Fuller, John Johnson, Russ East, and sending them and blitzing them and sending Ernest Jones and so forth. So, I think really what you're going to get is obviously there's some rotations here. But I think pretty much the majority of the game, you're going to see the Rams like to use all 3 of their safeties. They like to use Russ East. They like to use John Johnson, who's put himself back in the rotation. Took him a little bit. He had an interception against his former team, the Browns, last week. So that was huge. That pretty much changed the game. And then, of course, Jordan Fuller, who 2 weeks ago played the best game of his career with 4 pass breakups. He was just outstanding. So
who's got the green dot now? Does Fuller have that, or does one of the linebackers have it?
Ernest Jones has it.
Ernest Jones. Okay.
Yeah.
So Ernest Jones hasn't quite played the whole season. He's obviously missed a couple games here. If this is, say it's 11 out of 12 games.
Yeah. Ernest Jones missed the Packers game, I believe. So when he missed the Packers game, Jordan Fuller had the green dot.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
so
right,
that's pretty much how they do it. But I mean, yeah, you're going to see different looks, of course. You're going to see, Troy Reeder in there. You're going to see Christian Roseboom in there at linebacker. They do get in when they have more of a base package, but typically speaking, they like mixing it up. And, I think the thing that's so fascinating about the Rams is that defensive line, which, a lot of people don't know the names of these guys. The casual fan doesn't know anything about the defensive line except, there's Aaron Donald, number 99. But, Kobe Turner's been outstanding, just outstanding. I mean, the last 3 weeks, it just seems like he gets 2 sacks a game now. I don't know if that's true, but it feels that way. Then you have, Bobby Brown, who's back. They lost him at the very end of the Eagles game in garbage time. Very sad. But he came back and he's been huge for the rotation. They got Jonah Williams, who's great in the run game. They got guys like Desjuan Johnson, Mr. Irrelevant. So, they've really had some key contributions from these guys, and it's been a fun defensive line to watch. I mean, you still would like to see, if you're a Rams fan, you still like to see better pressure off the edge. I think that's the issue. I think lately, the hope is that Byron Young is going to be able to do something against Ronnie Stanley, because he got pretty stifled by Jerron Christian last week. I mean, I got to give Jerron Christian a lot of credit. I think he's really found his stride. He's playing really well. I was watching the tape with him before the Rams played the Browns, and I was really impressed with the way he's been playing. So, their 3rd round pick, Byron Young, he's shown a lot of, confidence, and, he's shown a lot of ability. But I think the problem with him is he doesn't have an arsenal of moves. And we knew that coming in. This guy's elite athlete, but he's kind of he's going to try to win with a speed to power move. He's going to try to get by his guy with speed, but he's not throwing you, different spin moves and a ghost move and, a rip or anything like that. You're just not getting that from him. And then on the other side, you have 6'4", 310 pound outside linebacker, Michael Hoyt. And he's tough because he has his moments and he played really well last year. It's why he's even playing right now. They really like the way he finished the season. But Hoyt, and we saw this this past week, Hoyt, when he gets out there in coverage, it's like he's an elite athlete at his size, but he looks like a fish out of water. And we saw it against the Eagles. Dallas Goedert, they got him one-on-one with Hoyt, and Hoyt he did his best. I mean, the guy, you see the 310, 6'4" guy running straight down the field, but he's not covering Dallas Goedert.
Okay, so here's the question. How do you construct a defense where a guy who's 6'4", 310 drops 167 times into coverage? I mean, the Ravens outside linebackers are really known. The Ravens scheme-wise are really known for dropping their outside linebackers, particularly when they had Tyus Bowser and Matthew Judon, and they were good cover guys. But this is unbelievable to me. I mean, it's got to be one of the highest numbers for an for a line of scrimmage player in the entire NFL. And you're right. It doesn't look like he's been very good.
No, it's bizarre. I feel for him because it doesn't indicate, like, you would think this guy can't play. You think he ran like a 4.6, like he's Aaron Donald fast, but it's like Aaron Donald covering a guy deep down the field. I mean, if you were to put Aaron Donald on your tight end and you have, tight end, runs a go, I mean, Aaron Donald's going to have bad stats. Now people are going to be like, oh, wow, Aaron Donald really sucks in coverage now, doesn't he? It's like, does he? Or is he just being put in these incredibly low, win opportunities? I mean, the percentage of win there, when you have a guy like Dallas Goedert, I mean, and we saw that last week. I forget what receiver got it. I don't think it was Njoku. I think it was a receiver. It might have been Elijah Moore. It was a huge, third down. Flacco gets out. And you have Michael Hoyt out there, and it's like he's in no man's land. I mean, Elijah Moore, say what you will, but I mean, he's way too athletic to be covered by a 310-pound, quote unquote outside linebacker. So, they also have some other guys there, but make no mistake about it. I mean, that was the one position going into the trade deadline. If this team had the money to do it and they had the draft capital where they felt comfortable doing it, Chase Young or Montez Sweat would be a Ram right now, and it would be a perfect fit. But I mean, they were so uncertain as to what they were going to do. I had confidence in them. I picked them to go 10-7 before the season, but you could see it. Like, the fans were starting to get, less interested in the team. It was starting to kind of look like, okay, maybe they won't be that great. And the problem is trade deadline comes at what, week 8, week 9? They just didn't look good enough to make a
call
trade.
Then. Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's my question about the Rams. I'm dead set as a season ticket holder. I am dead set against the Rams model for my team. You want to play the roller coaster parody ride like the Rams have. The Rams obviously are the model for it in terms of winning a Super Bowl. And I wish it hadn't happened, because as soon as it did, it created this blather on Twitter over how the Ravens ought to get every star quality. Everyone has any little bit of name recognition at a skill position. Basically,
oh yeah,
our fan base wants. And I'm very much a play the cards you got. Make the best use of the players you got and pick up bargains wherever you can, especially when your quarterback's on the second contract and you don't have the kind of cap leeway. Being a good GM is about making the tough decisions on where you're not going to spend money. It's not spending $18 million on Odell Beckham. It's not, doing the other, spending a lot of money on Patrick Queen, for instance, would be just a disgrace. I think if it happened at this point as a second inside linebacker getting paid. It's about making the tough decisions of, we're not going to pay running backs in our system. We're not going to pay a lot of money to anybody but our top tight end. We're going to pay one wide receiver. Maybe we're going to pay two, but we're certainly not going to have a host of offensive skill position players that are all among our highest paid players.
Yeah.
I'm so bothered by it. And I'm really, frankly, really bothered by the fact that the Rams in the middle of that 7-year drought of no number one picks. And that's still ongoing, right? 24. They don't have a pick.
They will have a pick this year. They will.
Really?
Yes. I gotta say, I think the Rams are the trailblazers of the NFL right now. And I don't mean the Portland Trailblazers. I think they're blazing the trail. Now watch, Ken. Remember I said this. We had the F them picks mentality, and now everyone see the Niners doing it. You see the Niners do it. No one's going to say that. It's okay if the Niners do it. The Rams do it. They're buying a championship. But the Rams did that whole strategy, and now the Rams are literally doing it a different way, the exact opposite. They are saying, we have X amount of dollars to pay off this credit card debt. We could do this, each year, or we can just do it all right now. And they decided to do it all right now. They're paying $75 million to players that will not be on the roster in 2023. And they're not.
I'll just say that strategy is one
crazy.
That's been adopted many times by the Oakland Raiders, primarily, by other organizations that have not been successful doing it. The Rams are unique.
Yes.
More or less unique in that they've been willing to do it. I guess the Saints would be another team who did a lot of the credit card forcing money ahead, and they just happen to be lucky enough to play in the NFC South where they still can contend even when they're terrible.
It's happened before, but not on the level of like the Rams, because to go from like, it was like a windshield wiper, Super Bowl, no Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Like because like last year they were kind of caught in the middle. They wanted to, and I still believe, Ken, if they didn't have all those injuries, they could have competed for a Super Bowl. They really could have. I mean, they were in every game except for one possession game going into the fourth quarter, all those games. And they had 17 different offensive line combinations. Stafford only played 11 games. Aaron Donald only played 11. I mean, they definitely could have if they stayed healthy. The problem is that opened up a bigger question for the Rams. They had to have that internal discussion. They had to really think and say, is this worth it? Should we really do this? And that they actually had to make a tough decision at the deadline. I mean, they really wanted Christian McCaffrey. He was the guy. They were like, all right, we got Todd Gurley again. And they ended up balking at it. See, a lot of people think the 49ers just outbid them. No. If the Rams really decided they were going to get Christian McCaffrey, come on, Ken, we already know the proof is in the pudding with this team. They're willing to offer 3 first rounders for Brian Burns. I mean, they would have done it. They would have gotten Christian McCaffrey. I just think they were caught in the middle of a season where, again, that trade deadline sneaks up on you, and the Rams just didn't have enough to justify at a losing record. And you weren't going to be that team, because this is a reckless way to build a team. You're losing, you're 4-5 or whatever at the deadline. You don't go out and you get a move to make yourself a 500 team, because that's ridiculous to assume one player is going to do that for you. What you do, and this is the thing, is that the Rams always use the deadline correctly. The 2021 season, they didn't actually pay a lot of guys. What they did is they traded for Von Miller. They signed OBJ. OBJ fell into their lap. I mean, it wasn't like they went out and signed him in the offseason. But Von Miller, they traded for him. And this was a team that was, they were undefeated, I believe, at the time. This was right before their losing streak in November. Go back to 2018 when they go to the Super Bowl. They're undefeated. They just beat the Packers. I was at that game. Then that week, right after, I think it was 2 days after, they get Dante Fowler. And it just was huge for them because they needed that extra edge defender. I don't mind doing that. I mind doing it if you're doing it as kind of like, I mean, to me, it's like chasing your losses. If you've lost your bets, just realize you've lost it. The season's over. Don't go and get a rental, give up draft capital for next year for it.
So I guess here's the question that I kind of want to crystallize this down to is, does your season ticket holder base accept the Rams philosophy and embrace it wholeheartedly? Or are they avidly vocal about, vehement about not really wanting this and wanting to sit on draft picks and finally have something to look forward to in April and May?
It's a split decision, no matter what way you slice it. I do think a lot of it was biased because, I mean, I'm just going to say it. You have a lot of people in Los Angeles that love that Caleb Williams kid out of USC. Watch him. They're USC fans. They love the idea of bringing him to Hollywood. A lot of them didn't give this team a shot. They didn't give this team a shot. They said, we're tanking. I kept saying they're not. I kept saying they're trying to win while remodeling. They're not rebuilding. They're not fully rebuilding. They're doing the retooling. they're not tanking, but a lot of the Rams fans that are also USC fans wanted him. They wanted a young quarterback. Now CJ Stroud starts off the season really hot, and Rams fans continue to want a young quarterback. See, we could have that. That's Drake May. That's Caleb Williams. That's this guy. That's that. It's not. We don't know it if it is. To just assume it's going to happen is ridiculous. So, my thing is, Les Snead has proven that he's a legitimately top 10 GM in the league. I mean, he is. He's won at every level. Whether he's either traded for guys, whether he's, drafted guys, which, by the way, I found out this year more than ever, Les Snead has more to do with the draft than people realize. Like he wanted Kobe Turner. Sean McVay does not do as much draft work as some of the other head coaches in the league. Mm-hmm. And Les Snead just put together a masterful draft. I mean, the 14 picks without a first round pick, and you got Puka Nacua, you got Steve Avila, Kobe Turner, Byron Young, even their punter is going to be a stud in Ethan Evans. And there's some other guys there that, we haven't seen yet that could do something. And so, I just think that he's doing a great job. And ultimately, I've just come to trust him because I watched him with Jeff Fisher and I saw what he was capable of. And I saw the willingness and having the backbone to go out and get the guys that you wanted to go out and get. But at the same time, I felt like he really needed that head coach to kind of keep it leveled off. And now that he has McVay, I think those two work really well. It doesn't mean that he hasn't made mistakes. The Rams have made mistakes. I mean, let's be honest here. Les Snead paid Tavon Austin. He paid Tavon Austin his second contract. We still had no idea what his role was. Sean McVay didn't really use him. He's paid guys like that before. He paid William Hayes, ended up trading him away. He paid Robert, Quinn. He paid, Robert Woods a second contract. A year later, he's getting traded for peanuts. And all these guys are getting traded. So my biggest issue with Snead is that he'll do that. But overall, I think Snead's one of the best GMs in football. And I think he's a big reason why the Rams won a Super Bowl and they've had a chance to win two. And it's not to take anything away from Sean McVay. But if you gave Sean McVay Billy Devaney back in the St. Louis era, Sean McVay's not coming close to a Super Bowl because you have to have both. You can't just win a Super Bowl with a great head coach. You have to have a great GM as well. Just like you can't win a Super Bowl with a great GM because if the head coach doesn't make good decisions at the end of games, they don't win. So I think it's a fascinating thing, but Ken, I'll tell you, I think it's really split. I think this fan base, a lot of them just look at this like, I don't want to get into the first round and win a game and get knocked out. I'd rather just get a top 10 pick. And I say, look, you haven't had a first round pick since Jared Goff in 2016. Who cares where the pick is? You have a first round pick again. You don't even have to pick in the first round. You can trade down and get more picks. I'm not against that. But the idea that you're going to basically shoo away a playoff shot, you're going to shoo away the opportunity to play more football games with, I got to tell you, a lot of these guys are going to be on the team next year, right? Most of these guys, some of them will be gone. A lot of them are part of their core that they're going to be building around. And the idea that you don't want those guys to get playoff experience, this valuable playoff experience, and instead you'd want a top 10 pick of a college kid that's never played in the NFL, it's mind-boggling to me, Ken. I'd never feel that way.
I mean, the Rams are so far from being in on the top quarterback sweepstakes at this point. That's not even an issue as far as I'd be concerned. I guess I want to know if the people who are basically saying trade everybody are the guys who are watching the games from their couch and the people who are basically saying leave our draft capital alone. In fact, don't even screw with our cap in any kind of odd ways that's going to de-levelize our performance, are really the people who are paying for season tickets. Because I think that's generally the split. Is if you have the ability to turn off the TV set, you don't care as much.
I could never do that. But yeah, I get what you're saying. I think it's really it's 50-50 with a caveat. Fans, I mean, there's tribalism when it comes to fandom. And I feel like, without trying to offend any Rams fans, I mean, I feel like it's very, okay, hey, we won 3 straight, so now I no longer care about the draft. But if they lose to the Ravens, who, again, I've said, I believe are going to win the Super Bowl, and this is the toughest test of the season, if they lose this game, it doesn't matter if they lose it by 1. The next day, the views go down. The engagement goes down. People are talking about the draft. And I just feel like that's kind of fandom in general. I mean, it shouldn't be, but I think a lot of fans are just very wishy-washy. And I think you kind of have that element in that 50-50 split where now it kind of fluctuates. So that 50-50 could lean towards just playoffs, right? I like what Snead's doing. I believe in Snead. I'm giving him the right to go out, sign Robbie Gould, spend $8 million on a kicker because we need it. And then on the other hand, it could be like, no, like I don't want them to spend a dime on another player. I would release some of these guys. I'd trade them in the offseason, get rid of Cooper Kupp. Like I've seen both sides. And for me, I've viewed them. I only see one way here. The Rams, basically what they told us they were going to do. They want to win as many games as possible in 2023 with the eye on 2024, 2025, and 2026 being the start of the next era of Rams football. And they believe that by 2025, they should be back in the Super Bowl. And I believe that is the case. I think they could be back in next year. Everything they do from here on out is setting the tone for the future. And if they were to go 10-7, like I initially predicted, that sets them up for a Super Bowl bid next year when they have $60 million in cap space and they can go out and they can get a Josh Allen in free agency, or they can go out and get Josh Uche in free agency and help shore up that pass rush. They can go out and, trade up with the draft capital, trade up into the first round further and get their left tackle of the future. Those things are what I'm most focused on when talking about the future. Because to me, when a team has shown you they're 3-6 coming out of the bye, they lost their quarterback. So really they're 3-5 at that point without Stafford. And then they come out and they win 3 straight, 2 of which are playoff teams. You could argue Seattle's played well this year. The Browns, the Cardinals are not an easy team. They're like the toughest 3-10 team you'll see. You guys know because the Ravens
on that one.
Yeah. But the 2 out of the 3 though, those teams, I mean, those were tough teams. And to see the way this team has responded and the fact that they're the 3rd youngest team in the NFL, and Matthew Stafford appears to be getting more comfortable as the season goes on. And they have Cooper Kupp to fall back on if they need to. And Aaron Donald looks like Aaron Donald. It's just like when you have the other guys that make the team what it is, Akello and, Kevin Dotson and Kyron and Puka, it's a thing of beauty to watch. And really the Rams are setting themselves up with 60+ million cap space next year, guys that they found that could be franchise cornerstone pieces in this draft. And they have a potential to win, more than, go above 500 this season, in a season that a lot of people had them picking the top 5.
Well, that's certainly true. Nobody expected this from the Rams. Let's finish up with the defensive backfield a little bit. Tell me who they have back there, and then I have some specific Ravens questions.
Awesome. Yeah. So, defensive backfield, you're going to see, as I mentioned, Akello and Darian Kendrick. You're going to see Kobe Durant in the star role. And then you're going to see, John Johnson, Jordan Fuller, and Russ East for the most part. I think they're definitely not as good of a secondary as the Ravens. I think Akello's playing as good as any corner in the league. But I think like when you look at, the Ravens, just like Geno Stone, to have that in your back pocket, he's been such a terror in the secondary. The Rams don't have that. The Rams don't have a guy where you're like, I can't even throw that near him without him picking it off. Like Akello, the thing about Akello is that he plays in that trail technique and he's got crazy long arms. He's 6'3", runs a 4.4, and he does a great job, but the problem is like, because his role is so important to just get it done, he hasn't been able to play with that aggressive, like chancy play that he wants to. So because of that, he's been more of a lockdown guy. That's put Darian Kendrick in the role of like, you need to get turnovers. Safeties need to get turnovers because Akello's shutting it down. But if this team needs some interceptions, Akello's capable of it. But he knows right now, playing without safety help, he's the last line of defense.
Mm-hmm. All right, very good. I guess one of the things I always ask before we go into this is pick one player on each side of the ball who you think matches up particularly well against the Ravens.
One player on each side of the ball and matches up well. All right. Well, I'll say I think Witherspoon matches up well against any receiver on the Ravens. Because he's battle tested. He's gone up against DK Metcalf, Jamar Chase, etc. And, he's only had 9 games this year, which he's allowed. He's had 9 out of 12 games. He's allowed fewer than 40 yards. I think that helps with OBJ down the field. I think that helps with Nelson Aguilar, who's been kind of their deep threat. Rashad Bateman. Zay Flowers is phenomenal, but I worry more about getting Zay Flowers in space in the short game, having to break some tackles, and then there's only a few guys left in the back. So I think really if you match him up with Akello, I think he matches up well with anybody. And I think that's a big thing there, big matchup. And then I think on the offensive side, this one's tough because, in reality, I just think the Ravens just match up really well with the Rams. If I'm just being honest. But I would say Kyren Williams against, the run defense. I think Kyren Williams is going to face a very similar fate as what he faced against the Browns, is that the Ravens can stop the run. The Ravens can come up and they can make negative plays. They can force negative plays. So the Rams are going to have to be one step ahead with their play calling, but also Kyren is going to have to continue to break tackles the way he does and finish after contact. And, I think he's really the deciding factor. If Kyren has a solid game, they have a chance to win. If he has a less than solid game, kind of a down game, they don't win. And if he has kind of a game above solid, he has a really good game, I think they do win. And I think that's what it comes down to. But I've said it before, I have the Ravens winning this game. So I think Kyren's going to have kind of the same as last week, maybe around 80 yards, but not something to keep the game going. And you're in your game flow and you're able to call the game how you want to. But I don't see him, against this defense going off. And I think that's something that, you would want to see. And that would definitely help your case, but I don't see it.
All right. Well, Jake, always a pleasure to talk football with you. Where can folks read your stuff or talk football with you online?
Yeah, I really appreciate it, Ken. They can follow me at JK Bogan on social media, all of social media. You can Google me, Jake Ellenbogen. I'm on YouTube at Jake Ellenbogen channel. And I also cover the Rams on Turf Show Times. I'm on 2 other podcasts as well, Believe in Rams and Downtown Rams. And I have an NFL show, which might be most used to Ravens fans here, called Off the Edge, where you can actually find us on Bleacher Report. We do Bleacher Report live streams. And, we also have a channel, Off the Edge, on YouTube. But a lot of stuff I'm working on, Ken, a lot more than the last time we talked.
All right. Well, very cool, Jake. Always a pleasure. Other folks out there, if you'd like to be on a film study, sure, hit me up. The bye week's always a good time, but I'll make time any time of the year. And some of this content may not make it on until after the season, but would love to have you on, talk about something you're passionate about with regard to the Baltimore Ravens, and put together a nice 15 to 30 minutes of content so people will have a shorter episode to look at and less intimidating than the typical hour-long content I produce. Really appreciate that. Jake, appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Ken.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.